Welcome back. This is one of the most interesting segment and also very important too. Net metering makes a solar project financially more attractive and brings the best utilization along with more returns for the user. It also ensures the zero wastage of solar energy. Yes, zero wastage or no wastage at all. Interesting, isn't it? Do you wish to know how it happens? Let's begin with a few questions first. Imagine a scenario in which a family consisting of a couple and they have installed a solar plant of 10 kilowatt capacity. This couple leaves the home early in the morning at 8 am and there is no one else in the family. Therefore, there is no usage of the electricity, but the solar plant is generating the power from the sun and has produced 40 electricity units in the day. The question arises, what would happen with these 40 units? Let us hold this question for some time. Now the day is over and the couple return back to home at 7 pm and they start using the electricity for their equipments, which includes TV, lighting, air conditioning, etc. By this time, the sun has been set and solar plant is off from the duty and not generating any power. Now, the second question arises. Will they get the benefit of the power generated during the day? Or will they get the benefit of the 40 units generated during the day? To get the answer, let us see this small video to understand what happens with the solar generated power. In this video, you could see that the solar power is produced and if it is not getting used, the same is getting exported to the grid. And for the night duration, when the solar plant is not generating, at that time electricity is taken from the grid. We have just seen the receiving of the power from the grid and sending of the power to the grid by the consumer. Now we need to understand it bit more deeper. How does it happen and how the accounting of this receiving and sending of electricity is done? To understand this, let's begin from the source. Before installing a solar plant, number of sources for electricity for the consumer was only one, and that was the source from the local discom or the local grid. However, after installing the solar plant, number of sources becomes two, as solar plant also become a source. Now, solar is the second source. With this, we have two sources, and whenever the power is required to be consumed, both these sources, discom and solar, work together and supply the electricity to the consumer. Both these sources take care of the needs of the consumer. However, there is a condition of the supply between both of them. Let us understand this important condition, and this condition is also the main logic of net metering. Since solar is an in-house source of electricity, it becomes the first source of preference. And whenever solar is sufficient to supply the load, it keeps on feeding the load. No power shall be taken from the discom till the time solar is able to supply the load. The power from the discom shall be taken only when the solar is not able to supply for the total load, or we can say when the load demand is more than the solar generation. To understand this better, let us take a few examples in a numerical manner so that we can gain more clarity. Before taking these examples, it is important to review the two basic terminologies of the net metering. The first terminology is import units. These are the units which are taken from the discom. It means whenever we are taking power from the discom, those will be called import units. The second terminology is export units. These are the units which are sent to the DISCOM or the grid. This happens when the produced solar power is not used. Now let's begin with the first example. In the first example, we are assuming that the power produced by the solar plant is able to meet the consumer requirement. For example, let us say consumer require 5 kilowatt of power and the solar is able to generate 5 kilowatt of power too. Under this case, solar is able to supply the required power and therefore no power shall be required for import from the grid. Also, since there is no unused power, therefore no export as well. So in this case, import power is equal to 0 kilowatt, export power is equal to 0 kilowatt, solar generated power is equal to 5 kilowatt and consumed power is also equal to 5 kilowatt. Now let us take the second case in which we are assuming that the power produced by the solar plant is not able to meet the consumer requirement in a fully manner. For example, consumer require 7 kilowatt of power and the solar is able to supply 5 kilowatt of power only. Under this case, import power shall be 2 kilowatt. Why? Because after taking 5 kilowatt from solar, still 2 kilowatt of power is short and this shortage of power shall be taken from the grid. Therefore, import power shall be 2 kilowatt. However, in this particular case, export power shall be 0 kilowatt as there is no unused power which can be sent to the grid. Now let us take one more example in which we are assuming that the power produced by the solar plant is more than the consumer requirement. For example, consumer require 1 kilowatt of power and the solar is able to supply 5 kilowatt of power. Now under this case, 1 kilowatt of power shall be taken from the solar. After meeting the requirements of the consumer, there is still a 4 kilowatt of power which is not used. Now this unused power shall be exported to the grid. Therefore, export power shall be 4 kilowatt. Since solar was able to supply all the requirement of the consumer in the excess, therefore there shall not be any import power from the grid. So the import power shall be 0 kilowatt. So it is very clear from the above cases that the 40 units produced during the day shall be exported and whatever units the couple will use during the evening till next morning shall be imported from the grid. So through this exporting of the units, they would have no wastage and all the power shall be adjusted in the bill. How the export of the power get adjusted in the bill, we would see it in the next segment. So in this particular segment, we reviewed what is net metering. We also reviewed that there is no wastage of power under the net metering as the power is either getting consumed or it is getting exported to the grid. So truly net metering is a very rewarding thing and very beneficial thing for the solar power plants. I hope these examples and cases have brought clarity. Hope you find it exciting too. Thank you so much for watching this. I see you in the next segment.